Models of health psychology. So I foreshadowed a lot of this coming into it. I said there are specific health psychology models that talk about the factors, both environmental and personal, that go into these self-regulation mechanisms for how we cope with the health struggles of modernity. So I'll introduce all of them to you now. There's 4 that we're going to cover, but not really, for reasons that I'll discuss. So the textbook covers it this way, and this is probably the most holistic way to look at it. There's some other models out there that just aren't as commonly used, so that you get most of the perspective on it here. So there are 4 main theories that we're going to focus on, but not really, because there's really only 2 major approaches here. I say that because the health beliefs model that we have here is kind of outmoded already, because the health beliefs model was very rapidly updated into what we call the protection motivation theory, which is literally exactly the same model, but with self-efficacy considerations added in, when self-efficacy became a very big thing in psychology literature. The exact same thing is true with the theory of reasoned action. The theory of reasoned action isn't even unique to health psychology. You can see it in a bunch of other things. But when they took the theory of reasoned action as applied to health and then added self-efficacy on top of that, you then rebrand it as the theory of planned behavior. So while it lists out 4 theories here, and the textbook is a little bit confusing in this regard because it mostly only shows the incomplete ones, the earlier ones in their graphs, we're really only looking at 2 perspectives here. I'll focus on the protection motivation theory because it is the health beliefs model with 1 extra element added, and we'll focus on the theory of planned behavior because it is the theory of reasoned action with this 1 extra element, self-efficacy, added on. So this is a quick visualization. I took this out of the textbook about the health beliefs model, and a common example that they use in the textbook for this is smoking. So it talks about the 4 elements inside the health beliefs model: perceived susceptibility, perceived severity, benefits and barriers, cues to action. That said, like I said, it's a bit outmoded. This is the version that doesn't look at self-efficacy, so let's throw that in here. So this is the exact same thing, but it's the protection motivation theory, the more updated version that has self-efficacy at the bottom. And I find, from past experience, this is the easiest way for students to wrap their head around what each of these considerations are. So if you wanted to model why do people smoke, what kind of judgments do they make in their head when some people lead themselves in a smoking direction, some people go in an abstaining from smoking direction, same thing with alcoholism, things like this. These are the considerations that are mapped out in the protection motivation theory, and to a large extent in the health beliefs model as well. Firstly is perceived severity. When you're judging perceived severity, what you're asking yourself is, does it affect people like me? Like the bad consequences of this. So let's take, for example, smoking. The negative consequences associated with smoking is things like lung cancer and emphysema. Do people like me, so let's say you're a 20-year-old or something like this, do 20-year-olds typically get, lung cancer and emphysema? If you think, no, not really, I don't see a lot of that out there, then that reduces your chances of staying away from this health-compromising behavior. Next one is the perceived severity. How bad would it be if I had it? Well, people know that things like lung cancer are very serious, that they're life-threatening, so if you thought that you had, I have a 20% chance of developing this at some point or something like that, then you would magnify that 20% based on the severity of the problem, as opposed to people saying like, I might get bad teeth or something like this. Those are less severe consequences. So we factor again susceptibility and severity in together. Then you have to map out what the beliefs and barriers are. Sorry, I'm leaning on the health beliefs model here. The benefits and barriers, you have to map them out and say, well, what is the underlying cost-benefit analysis here? What am I getting from this versus what are the things that would prevent me from accessing this? What do I stand to gain or lose from engaging in this behavior? So a lot of people for smoking would think, smoking will help me alleviate stress, but, I'll smell bad and I'll have, worse health outcomes. That's the balance I need to look at. And the last one in the health benefits model, second last one here, health beliefs model, is the cues to action, which is what things in the environment tell me I should or shouldn't do it. This is when you look at things like media messaging. A lot of people who get into smoking when they're teenagers do so not so much because their lives are so stressful and they need the stress relief from nicotine or something like this, but they do it because smoking is cool. Other people have role modeled smoking as being cool to them. It's a classic James Dean Greaser-esque sort of thing, or a punk aesthetic or something like that. Whereas for people like me who never picked up smoking, it's because I saw PSAs on TV when I was a kid. Smoking is uncool, but people think it's cool, so they're lame and things like that. Those are the kind of things we mean by cue to actions. What things tell me I should or shouldn't do this? What are the peer groups or media influences pushing me one way or another on it? And then, because this is the protection motivation theory, we add one more element. Do I think I'll succeed if I try to change? So let's presume you've already started engaging with smoking. You know, you've picked it up. It's a casual habit now. The real question then becomes, if I'm going to engage, in changing these other aspects to try to stop smoking or to quit smoking, do I think I'll succeed if I try? Or is it something that will be too hard and I'm likely to fail? This is why we do a lot of efforts like quit line outreach and things like this, to say like, hey, other people have succeeded at this before. It is possible to quit smoking. You know, don't give up on it prematurely. It's very possible, so you shouldn't have low self-efficacy on the matter. But that whole thing there, like those 5 considerations, that's the entirety of the protection motivation theory, one of the 2 big ways of looking at this. This is a graphical breakdown of the theory of reasoned action, which is a much simpler theory that focuses a lot more on what somebody's intention for a particular behavior is. So this is more appropriate for some other things, less appropriate for others. So it breaks down into attitude towards the behavior, subjective norms, and then eventually you add in self-efficacy for the theory of planned behavior. These give you your intentions, and then your intention, the execution of your intentions, which also is self-efficacy, leads to the behavior. So again, if we break that down there, again, I try to put this in, anthropic words here, easy to wrap your head around. Attitudes towards the behavior is asking, what do I believe will be the results of this action, and are they good or bad? So for things like smoking, if I believe I will have a lot of stress reduction but never catch lung cancer, or I'll be so old I would die of something else by then you might be thinking, oh, I can get a lot of good and not that much bad, maybe this would be a good idea. Or if you look at it thinking, oh, I'll get some benefits but way worse bad outcomes, then maybe I shouldn't do it. It's that intrinsic weighing up just from what you believe, either accurately or inaccurately, will be the consequences. Then you add in the subjective norms. Who thinks I should or shouldn't do this, and how will they react if they find out? So again, this is that peer group element of it. You know, if all my friends think smoking is cool, will that increase my social acceptance? Maybe then it's worth doing. But if my mom catches me smoking, will she kick me out of the house or something like this? I should factor that into my decision as well. According to the theory of planned behavior and also the theory of reasoned action, if you put those 2 things together, you get your main sense of what your intention is. You know, again, the good versus the bad, people who will accept you or reject you. You put those weighted judgments together to get your intention as to whether you think you should or should not do it, or whether you should do it and hide it, something like that. And then you enter in with self-efficacy to jump from the intention to what you actually end up doing. Do I think I'll succeed if I try to do something else? So if you have a set of intentions that once said, yeah, smoking is great, and now your beliefs or norms have changed, and now you're like, oh, now I'm a smoker, but I don't want to be. Again, we have that element of self-efficacy. If I tried to change my behavior, do I think I would succeed? This is why we do all the outreach around, making people feel like they'll succeed. So, I mean, we do the emphasis on smoking here, as the textbook suggests, because it just kills a lot of people. But you can apply this underlying logic to any kind of self-regulated health problem, including, alcoholism, eating healthy food, things like this. Exercise as well. So when we talk about barriers, and barriers is an expanded thing that you can take out of the theory of the health beliefs model and its follow-on. When we talk about barriers, we're talking about situational factors. We can talk about them separately, which may get in the way of somebody being able to change their behavior or engage with better health outcomes. So they break down onto 4 levels here. And again, this is mostly just introducing to you the language that you would use to talk about why someone may have barriers to changing their health for the better. Individual barriers are things like how much future discounting your personality leads you towards. The more outgoing you are, the less conscientious you are, the more future discounting you tend to be. And also things like gender roles, they play into this view of how you see yourself. Family, what was your role modeling from your parents? Do you have inherited genetic vulnerabilities to certain kinds of behaviors like alcoholism, things like that, caring needs? Health systems, based on where you are in the world, what is the cost availability and outreach and awareness of the various health services that could help you, and of course community, cultural, and ethnic things, which mostly affect people who belong to vulnerable ethnic minorities and immigrant communities and things like this, or even just certain degrees of social isolation. If you just don't have networks of people looking out for you, how will you be spurned on into doing things that could improve your health? So to give a quick example of this, this is a picture of my brother Gary. As you can see, he gets all of the good looks in the family. He's my older brother. I'm going to use him as a quick example for how barriers play out in this sense, because Gary has a lot of gastrointestinal issues. He gets, gut inflammation, he gets reflux and things like this, a lot of which is exacerbated by his heavy alcohol consumption. There's a lot he could be doing, from a health intervention perspective to make his life better and more comfortable and more healthy, but if we look at the barriers that he has as an individual, we can see why he doesn't. On an individual level, his future discounting is pretty high. He's not very conscientious, doesn't think about the future very much. And from a gender roles perspective, which is a surprisingly big thing on this, he's very reluctant to go see doctors. He feels that he would be a failure as a man if he wasn't, able to competitively drink with his friends and things like this. That's part of how he defines his particular conception of masculinity. From a family perspective, we can see more of this. He takes after my dad, who has a lot of the same kinds of health problems. We have in our family a genetic tendency towards alcoholism. That's to say that we have good alcohol dehydrogenase. It's easy to become a competitive drinker when you're younger. And my dad role models an aversion to seeing doctors. Literally in my whole family, I'm the only one who is not averse to seeing doctors, possibly because I am one of a different type. But, it's this idea that, I don't want to hear bad news, so I'll stay away from doctors. If that's role modeled for you, it's a barrier to health outcomes. You don't get positive feedback on that. From a health systems perspective, he's worried that if something bad is diagnosed in him, he'll fear the cost of intervention. He's like, I'm a poor plumber. How could I afford, a kidney transplant or something like this, or a liver transplant? So he doesn't worry about it. He figures he's better off as it is. And from a community and cultural perspective, while he is part of the white Western mainstream, he has good access in principle. He also lives alone. He doesn't have close friends who are watching him closely. He doesn't have a girlfriend or a wife or something like this. So that relative isolation that he lives in doesn't communicate with the rest of the family all that often either. There's no one watching his back to worry about him when things are going bad. And that means that if he's putting these concerns out of his mind, there's nobody to mop up on that. So those are his kind of, barriers to health outreach. So we look at these sort of things, both the models themselves to target particular elements and the barriers as a secondary consideration to try to figure out, how can we target people who are vulnerable? How can we outreach? How can we do outreach to people who would benefit the most from the dropping of certain social barriers and from, getting better messaging and better, better beliefs about how they can improve their health? How can we empower people to have better lifestyles, rather than leaving them in isolation such that we know that their own judgment is going to fail them and they're going to die sooner than they otherwise would have? So that leads us on to the physiology of stress being the other big X factor behind this that really compromises people's health. I will see you in the next video.